Hello one and all, and welcome to this very special Three Kingdoms edition of the DVD shelf for Flix, the show that would rather high-five a good movie than execute a bad one. Every movie I feature is one that I enjoy, however, not all movies are created equal, which is why at the end I will be using this scale to rate them. In this very special extended episode, I'll be discussing a two-part movie that covers a section of China's history that I find very fascinating and interesting. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I discuss the Chinese epic Red Cliff, Part 1 and 2. Alright, time to rewind. I've been drawn to the era of China known as the Three Kingdoms era for a very long time. This era began at the end of the Han Dynasty in the early 200s. The Three Kingdoms era was full of war, conflict, strategy, alliances, and betrayal, and is a huge part of China's history and folklore. Now, my exposure to this timeline comes largely from the partially fictionalized retelling of the events in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel, which was written by Lu Guangzhong in the 14th century. This novel combines the historical facts with myths from the era and an overarching historical fiction that covers the end of the Han Dynasty all the way through the reunification of China in 280 AD. I was introduced to these characters, battles, and history that make up the novel thanks to the Dynasty Warriors series of video games, which I picked up with Dynasty Warriors 4 back around 2003, and that video game series is based on Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel. In these games, you get to play as one of the legendary and mostly historical generals, warriors, strategists, or leaders from the era as you fight your way through real and fictitious battles and scenarios. And it is quite possibly my favorite video game series. They have since released many different expansions, spin-offs, and sequels, with the most recent US release being Dynasty Warriors 8. One of the battles featured prominently in every single game is the Battle of Red Cliffs, which was a decisive battle that would lead to the dividing lines that formed the Three Kingdoms of which the era is known for. The battle itself was a major one, but Romance of the Three Kingdoms fiercely exaggerated and dramatized it, so do the Dynasty Warriors video games that take their cue from the novel. And these movies also seem to follow this tradition and are not going for complete historical accuracy, which is also in line with popular Chinese culture. These events and figures have become larger than life, in part thanks to the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The line between fact and myth has become a bit gray, and a majority of reproductions tend to favor the more exaggerated romance as opposed to the factual. I would also like to note that for a strangely long period of time, there were no movies about the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. There were TV shows, theatrical productions, video games about the era, but from the 1930s until 2008, there were no movies at all depicting anything from that era. And now, since 2008, we've had 4 movies revolving around events or characters from the novel. Well, 5 movies if you count Red Cliffs Part 1 and 2 as separate. And these are all movies starring big names and with big budgets, so it seems like this era is in style again. Okay, I can hear you out there. You've barely talked about the movies so far. You're not the long-winded one. Leave that to David on the regular DVD shelf movie reviews. You should punt a flaming cantaloupe at M. Night Shyamalan. And yes, I do agree with all of those, so let's get into the movies. Released in 2008 and 2009 respectively, Red Cliffs Part 1 and 2 were made as one whole movie and then split into 2 parts for the Asian theatrical release. These 2 parts were then combined again and vastly cut down for their international release, which resulted in a cut that took out approximately half from each part, turning a 5-hour epic production into a 2.5-hour rushed mess. The filmmakers behind this epic film state they cut the international version's runtime in half because they felt the story is so well known in Asia that it's easy to follow, but they felt that everywhere else people would just get lost and confused with some of the similar names and the large number of important characters. So they think we're all really dumb. Thanks, Asia, and I'm primarily looking at you, China, since this movie came out of you. Now, maybe they are partially right. There is a lot going on in this movie and a lot of characters. But I don't think it's any harder to follow than the Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter movies. Hell, Game of Thrones has about 90 important characters and we seem to do okay with those. Even for those of us that haven't even read the novels upon which they're based. Given the rich history of this era, there were plenty of stories or situations to pull from. But this 2-part film focuses primarily on what led up to the Battle of Red Cliffs and the battle itself. The story of Red Cliff Part 1 follows the antagonist Prime Minister Cao Cao as he convinces the weak Emperor Han that in order to unite China, he must declare war on the kingdoms of Zhou and Wu. The Emperor agrees, and Cao Cao sets off and leads this massive military campaign himself, giving us the Battle of Shangban at the beginning of the film as he attacks the ruler of Zhou, Liu Bei. The result of Cao Cao's attacks is an unlikely alliance between the kingdoms of Wu and Zhou, as they decide to work together to stop their mutual enemy. And a majority of Part 1 is the process of forming this alliance, with some battles thrown in here and there. Part 2 picks up with Wu Princess Sun Shangjiang having infiltrated Cao Cao's camp in an act reminiscent of Mulan, which is interesting given that the same actress portrays Mulan in a live-action adaptation of that story. However, in this instance, she has infiltrated the enemy's camp so that she can provide intel back to the Wu and Zhou alliance. Both sides then prepare for the upcoming battle, and the film ultimately leads to the decisive battle of Red Cliffs. And to avoid spoilers for those of you that have never played a Dynasty Warriors game, I won't give too much away. Cao Cao takes his vastly superior numbers and prepares for a naval attack against the alliance, and the two kingdoms must work together and employ a number of strategies to try and seize victory against greater numbers. Will they be victorious? Will Cao Cao be stopped? You'll just have to watch to find out, or play a Dynasty Warriors game, or I guess read Romance of the Three Kingdoms. What am I saying? This is the DVD shelf, not the video game or bookshelf, so yes, you'll just have to watch to find out. Now, the story wouldn't be anything without a solid cast. The cast of this epic features a couple of big names who portray these larger-than-life characters wonderfully. Headlining as Wu strategist Zhao Yu is Tony Leung, who you may remember from my Infernal Affairs review. The film is also starring Takeshi Kaneshiro as famous and brilliant Zhuge Liang,
有点困难吧?
Fengyi Zhang as Cao Cao, Qin Cheng as Wu leader Sun Xuan, Wei Jiao as Sun Xuan's sister Sun Zhangzhang, Jun Hu as Zhu officer Zhao Yun, and Shido Nakamura as Wu officer Gan Zheng. Feng Yi and Jun have all appeared in other movies I've seen, but nothing that really stands out in my opinion. But the others I mentioned have all appeared in at least one, if not multiple, other films I enjoy and plan to review on here eventually, including Takeshi in The House of Flying Daggers and Wu Jia, also known as Dragon, Chen in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and The Grandmaster, Wei in Shaolin Soccer, and Shido in Fearless, and he was also in the Clint Eastwood film Letters from Iwo Jima. And it's not just the actors I wish to mention, but the director as well, who is none other than the legendary John Woo, who also co-wrote the screenplay. John Woo makes his return to Chinese films for the first time since 1992 with this 2008 war epic, something that is completely outside of his wheelhouse. John Woo is probably best known for either his early Hong Kong shoot-'em-ups that feature Chow Yun-Fat double-fisting pistols, such as The Killers, A Better Tomorrow, and Hard Boiled, or he's known for his Hollywood career that features some fun and some questionable films such as Hard Target, Broken Arrow, and Face Off. He did stray into war films in Hollywood with the 2002 World War II film Windtalkers, though it was a bit too Nicolas Cagey. But Red Cliff is executed much better and has a much different feel to it than anything else of his I've ever seen. So, welcome back to Chinese films, John Woo. Don't make anything like Paycheck ever again. Ever again. As I mentioned, John Woo is mainly known for his action films, and even though I would classify this more as a historical war drama, it does have some solid action during the battle sequences. Much like the Dynasty Warriors video games, the famous generals and warriors seem to have almost superhuman strength and abilities as they take on dozens of enemies at a time with ease. The martial arts action is therefore exaggerated and there is the use of wire work, but it's more to enhance their strength as they toss around enemies like they're frisbees. It may be a bit over the top, but I don't think it's too much so. They just ignore physics from time to time. And I think it adds a nice little touch to the more historical drama part of the film, giving us a film that really captures the essence of the Three Kingdoms era in Chinese culture, as it commonly mixes the fantastical with the historical. And since this is depicting war and battles, it shouldn't be too surprising that it does get quite violent and bloody. It doesn't get Saving Private Ryan gory, but this is still not a PG Kids Fest. However, on that note, there are some odd scenes that almost make it feel like a PG Kids Fest, such as the aforementioned storyline where Sun Zhang has infiltrated Cao Cao's camp. Almost every scene for that storyline has a much more lighthearted and goofy feeling than most of the rest. There are also the occasional comic relief scenes to break up the drama of violence and death, and they don't always work.
你敢踏进来吗？ 还有。
So, now the question. What would I rate these two films? Well, these films have fine acting, a deep and rich history to draw from, engaging characters, and there's some fun action sprinkled in there. Though the experience is a little uneven with some of these subpar comic relief scenes that break up the tension of the rest of the movie. I honestly find it difficult to have one without the other, as they're basically the same movie. So I think I'll have to rate them the same, and that is a 4. Check them out when you get a chance for the retelling of a popular Chinese historical story that most of you probably haven't heard before. And if you're a fan of this era, or the Dynasty Warriors games such as myself, then I highly recommend checking these out, as they are the best films depicting the Three Kingdoms era that I've seen thus far. And it might not be 100% historically accurate, but it captures the feeling of the romance of the Three Kingdoms well. If you choose to seek these out, be wary and check the description so that you know whether you're getting the severely cut US European version or the longer Asian cut. I was able to easily acquire parts 1 and 2 on Amazon a few years back, and even though these exact releases aren't really available anymore, you should still be able to find the extended releases easy enough. And even though the shorter cut is technically the international version, the Blu-ray release seems to call the original Asian cut the international version. So, be warned to check what you're getting. Well, that will do it for this episode. For the DVD Shelf for Flix, this is Joe Tai, reminding you to watch out for naval battles.